not going to be that big a deal without necessarily having to memorize a whole list of things. So you'll remember the categories as we use them. And I'm not going to say, list the types of genitives on an exam or something, but what I will do is say, what kind of genitive is this in the text? And I don't know how I'll test you, whether I'll say, have your cheat sheet and use that list, or whether I'll say, is this genitive A, here are 5 choices, pick one. But basically, that's what we're shooting for, not to memorize that list, but to understand what they are, and that's challenge enough, isn't it? And to be able to use them in the text. Yes?
Do you find that there's a lot of overlap where it could be 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 categories?
Yep. I remember when I took syntax, us having long arguments in class about, no, it's this, no, it's the other thing. And, as I look back on it, probably the professor was right more than we thought. But in any case, yeah, you can have large discussions. And, sometimes there is an issue, and there is an exegetical issue related to is it this or is it that. And sometimes it even, affects the way we look at theology.
Because form doesn't help us here at all, right?
Right.
It's got to be context.
Absolutely. This is totally a context. Once you nail what the case form is, then it's all context. It's all context.
I guess for me, one of the questions would be the subjective, the objective, and then the plenaries is sometimes it says they could be both of them. How we are able to determine that.
Yeah, and it does really get into some subjectivity and interpretation, actually. I've never seen that category, subjective and objective I've seen, but I've never seen someone say, okay, there's a plenary where it's both. But there are various texts I've come across where I think it's both. Never realized there was a category for that. And it's kind of interesting that there is a category. I don't know, you could just say it's both, right? But you have to have a category for it. But I guess if you have a category, that's cool. It's got a hook to hang on, right? The example, if I remember that he uses there, is that the love of Christ constrains us. Well, I think that has to do more with the nature of love, the word love, than anything else, because in 1 John we read that if anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. Is that subjective or objective? I think you can almost make an argument that it's both. Well, why? Because of the nature of love. 1 John explains that. We love because he first loved us. Right? What's our response to the love of Christ? To love him back. Where does our love come from? It's initiated by the love of Christ. So if you have love as a noun of action and a word in the genitive is it subjective or objective, almost, I think by the very nature of agape love as defined in the New Testament, it lends itself to being both at once. So that's kind of an interesting thing.
In that sense, that when you prepare a sermon, an exposition sermon, then you may have 2 different ways to describe perhaps the character of the love that is written there.
Well, if I were preaching that passage, I might explain it almost the way I just did, where, what motivates us to love? The love of God. And what happens when God loves us? Our natural response is to love him back. And so what is this talking about? The love of Christ. Is it Christ's love for us or our love for Christ? The nature of love means it's probably both. People can probably understand that. I don't think I'd say in a sermon this is a letter in Genesis. But I can kind of describe it. Page 55, we have the adjectival use of the genitive. What does the ablative mean? Source. He says over and over, when he talks about, it's kind of interesting how he continually, and I think it's good, he continually brings up the issue of the 5 or 8 case system. And he says over and over, case being a matter of form and not a matter of function. And that seems to be so opposite to me in the way we need to look at grammar. Are we limited by form in grammar, or are we looking at function in grammar? If we're recognizing that there is a clear distinction of function here, isn't that what we should be describing? And don't we already know that there are all kinds of ambiguous forms when we learn the forms in beginning Greek, that we know that there are all kinds of ambiguous forms. Now we know that, and sometimes that in the singular there is an alternate case ending for the vocative in the singular. Remember that? But in the plural, the ending, the vocative ending, is identical to the nominative ending. You remember that as well, I think. What does that mean? What are you going to say? That whenever a word is in the plural, what you really have there is a nominative used in place of a vocative? Or are you going to say that the plural ending for a vocative is the same as a nominative? You know, it seems to complicate it so much. You know, if you say, well, this is really a nominative, but it's being used as a vocative. Well, why not just break down and say, well, okay, it's a vocative. It just has the same form. Another example is, tell me what gender that article or that ending is. Well, tell me the gender number of cases that ending or that article. Plural. Okay, it's plural.
Genitive.
It's genitive. It could be masculine. It could be feminine. It could be neuter. They all have the same genitive plural ending. Now, what are you more concerned about, the form or the function?
Function.
Right, function. And you can go on, you know, with arguments like that. To me, it very much clutters the categories. And, you know, to be saying, well, everything's a genitive, but you have some in the descriptive category, you have some in the adjectival category, and we might even have some other category. He says that, well, sometimes you can have a genitive case form that functions in both the descriptive and the adjectival because there's deliberate ambiguity that the author is using. And that's true. Authors can be deliberately ambiguous, right? But why is it just because we call it a different case, but since it has the same form, why can't he be ambiguous as to what case it is instead of ambiguous as to what category it is? Right? Why can't he be using one form that is doubling for two cases because it happens to be of the same form? Right? So that's kind of a silly argument, I think. Especially when you get to the dative, locative, and instrumental. At the end of the day, I don't think it really makes a whole lot of difference in how we conceive the language. You know, to me, what is simpler? I mean, just from a practical standpoint, what is a simpler way to describe the language? So you can go whichever way you want to. But the genitive of separation, as he calls it, is the typical ablative form. Genitive of source is also typical of the ablative. Genitive of comparison, we would normally call that in the 8-case system an ablative of comparison. Notice how it works, bottom of page 56. Is not your life worth more than food? Now, there is no than expressed in English. The than comes from what? The fact that you have an ablative of comparison. So, taste, traphase is a genitive of comparison or an ablative of comparison. And what it means is, if you have an ablative of comparison or a genitive, an adjectival genitive of comparison, then it means than something. All right? Now, you have a comparison word there. Play on more. Is not your life more than food? Do you see that? Do you see the than comes in because it is a comparison genitive or ablative? Right? Kraton is another comparative word. Kraton, better. Having become better than the angels. See how you have to supply the than in a sense? But that is, the than part in English is implied, more than implied, really connoted by the use of that case. Right? questions about that? All right, verbal genitive, the subjective genitive, here we go. Well, what is a subjective genitive? When you have and he talks, and I don't like this language that he uses, not that he needs his mouth washed out with soap or anything, I think it's confusing. He talks about verbal nouns, and I think that's confusing because what do we normally refer to as verbal nouns? In our beginning class, we referred to infinitives as verbal nouns, didn't we? What he means here is nouns of action, or a noun in Greek that also has a cognate of the same root or stem that is a verb. Some examples of that. Well, love is one. Right? Agape, agapao. To believe is another. Pistis, pistuo. When the Bible talks about faith, pistis, and believe, pistuo, those are cognates, even though they're not in English. So, it's like we were saying, belief and believing. You see? So when you have a noun of action modified by a genitive, then you may well be dealing with either a subjective genitive or an objective genitive. What does that mean? Well, the implied action of the noun of action, for example, testimony. Marturia is a noun of action, isn't it? To bear witness. So the testimony of them. Now, the testimony of them could either mean that they are doing the testimony or testifying, right? Or it could mean that the testimony is about them. That would be an objective genitive. So if the noun in the genitive forms the subject of the action idea, the noun that's doing the action, I'm not talking about a grammatical sense as a subject of the sentence, right? I'm talking about in the logical sense of who is performing the action described by the noun of action, right? If the noun in the genitive is doing the action, it's a subjective genitive. Now that's fairly clearly what they call a subjective genitive. That doesn't mean subjective as opposed to logical. It means subjective, like the subject of the action, or the subject of the sentence. The objective genitive would be the object of the action described by the noun of action. Here, this is kind of interesting, this example, Romans 3:22, the righteousness of God through faith of Jesus Christ. Is that objective or subjective genitive? Is that faith in Jesus Christ? Is Jesus Christ the object of the action of believing? Or is he the subject of the action of believing? Is it the faith that is accomplished by Jesus or expressed by Jesus? That could change the meaning of that verse quite dramatically. And then, he gives the plenary genitive that it could be both. Now, in that case, I don't believe it could be both. The faith, the righteousness of God through the faith of Jesus Christ. I don't believe it could be both in that context. It's one or the other. So who's doing the believing? Someone believing in Jesus, or is it Jesus doing the believing? That probably has implications for our whole free grace thing.
That probably also is the issue. I did a research paper a long time ago about the obedience of faith from Romans, was it 121? And the commentaries all argue over whether it's faith's obedience, justification or sanctification, or if it's meant to be ambiguously both. That'd be that same issue that we're talking about.
I think though at the same time you have to look, when you look at the calling of the disciples, that obedience came before faith, because how could they know?
Obedience came before faith?
In the sense they obeyed, they left their nets straight away.
Yeah, but didn't they obey because they believed?
I don't know.
Which came first? Which comes first, the obedience or the faith?
I mean, there are different kinds of salvation faith, or different kinds of faith, or the faith to believe comes from God, Ephesians. So in that sense, faith comes first. But when you look at the obedience in the call,
Yeah,
they didn't believe, they had a problem with it.
What is Jesus calling them to, and who is he calling? Very interesting. You know, this is part of that whole thing with John MacArthur and the gospel of Jesus. The problem is he does not really give thought to the possibility that Jesus, even though he may be evangelizing, may be calling people to more than salvation. Which is probably a lesson to us. Maybe we ought to be calling people to more than salvation.
Sure.
When we call them.
Sure.
We get really concerned about, not adding to the gospel, and I think that should be a concern. So that people don't get the idea that they're saved by works. But at the same time, Jesus called people to a role, to an activity. Follow me and I will make you fishers of men. Well, maybe we should be thinking about that. Do we just call people to be saved typically, or do we call people to something greater than that? It's worth thinking about, isn't it? All right, adverbial genitive, page 60. Here, the genitive of time. Definition, the genitive substantive indicates the kind of time or time within which, and we saw this in John chapter 3. Nicodemus came to Jesus by night, and night there is in the genitive, so that's a genitive of time. What does that mean? Let's talk about the kind of time, not the extent of time. He didn't come to Jesus and was with him all night. He didn't come just at a point of time in the night. That's not the point. The point is that he came under cover of darkness. He came in a way that could be anonymous. So, genitive of time. Genitive of means. Some of these will be ablatives in other constructions of these categories, but a genitive of means. The righteousness of the faith. The righteousness by means of the faith. Now you've got to look at context, but in this word faith in the New Testament, when it occurs, well, and we'll look at this when we look at the use of the article pretty soon, but when a word like faith occurs without the article, it is used in a more abstract sense. It's used more like a noun of action, faith, believing. When you see the faith, oftentimes the reference is to a body of doctrine. If not usually, it is a reference to the body of doctrine. So when I suspect, without looking at the whole context, when you see the righteousness of the faith, or he's saying that's a genitive of means, the righteousness by means of the faith, that has to do with Christian teaching. God is not tempted of evil. God is not tempted by evil. Genitive of agency. What's the difference between means and agency?
Object and person.
Yeah, means is a thing, agency is a person. The genitive absolute, we've seen that used with participles, so he's going to treat that under the circumstantial participles. We've seen that, we learned at the beginning. Great. Genitive of reference, with reference to. An evil heart of unbelief. An evil heart with reference to unbelief. You might be just as well to put that in the descriptive category, I think. As describing the evil heart. Genitive of association. you are fellow citizens with the saints. You're fellow citizens of the saints. Fellow citizens with the saints is a better translation. All right. And then you have the genitive used after certain words. Page 63, the genitive after certain verbs. Now, actually, there are certain verbs that take their direct object in the genitive. We talked about this before, but the verbs of sensation, emotion, and volition, sharing, and ruling take their object in the genitive. So we actually have a genitive of direct object. We also have a dative of direct object, which we will see. And then after certain prepositions take a genitive or ablative case to complete them, and means certain things with the genitive, as opposed to another case. Dia, the genitive, means what? Prove. Dia with the accusative means
After my count.
I'm going to get the prepositions. I think I'll photocopy you out of Brooks and Weinberry, their treatment of prepositions, because it's a pretty good treatment of prepositions. The root meaning of the preposition dia, for example, is to. And then you look at the root meaning of the preposition, you look at the root meaning of the case, and kind of see where the meanings there are. So you can see where the word through comes from the idea of to, as you go in one side and out the other, right? And on account of, one thing is on account of another, so something is affecting something else. And so you kind of see whether genitive after certain adjectives and adverbs. For example, axios, worthy of something, or the example, guilty of something, deserving of something. When he says that, let me see if I can find exactly how he words that. I want to make sure you understand. Should have marked it in here. Okay, look on page 57. B, amplification. All right, number one, he says this category is lexosyntactic, and he uses phrases similar to that, using some form of the word lexicon. Right? So what does he mean when he says this category is lexosyntactic? That's a $10 word there, isn't it?
To a specific lexical meaning.
Well, it says at the bottom of the paragraph there that appeal must be made in context or authority usage and broader academic.
Speak up, please, so the mic can get you.
It says at the bottom of the paragraph that appeal, in that sense, in defining it lexosyntactic, appeal must be made to context, authorial usage, and a broader exegetical issues.
Yes, that's right. But the word lexicon, has to do with the meaning of the word. When the meaning of the word, by definition, is the noun has an action kind of meaning. Somebody said that. Then we know we're dealing with the noun of action. In other words, if you look at agape, you need to know the meaning of that, and it means love, and you know that love is an action concept, right? so now you know we could have a subjective or objective genitive related to that. And so it's the same, you know, when he says after certain words, well, that's a lexico-syntactical issue, isn't it, right? Because of the meaning of these words. Worthy, and even in English, it's similar. Or many of these examples are the same. Worthy of. He is worthy of your respect. So the word worthy can be completed by the concept of, and therefore a genitive kind of concept fits with that. You see? And then genitives after certain prepositions, where the certain prepositions take genitives in a prepositional phrase. We talked about dia, for example, and there are others, of course. All right, so that's the genitive case. You've read it. I don't want to spend that much time on every single one of them. What I want to do is get to the text and start applying it and allow you to say, okay, this is this kind of a genitive or that kind of a genitive. Ben, you just look excited about that.
I'm just excited.
He's very excited.
I hope this is great keeping you excited. All right, no questions on the genitive then? All right, dative case. Now, the dative case is the case of interest, either personal interest or non-personal interest, basically. And if you're an eight-caser, you also have a locative case. Of course, that's the case of the location. And the instrument full case is the case of means. He wraps them all together here. All right, bottom of page 66. Within the 8-case system, the dative, locative, and instrumental cases are all represented by the same inflectional form. But the distinction in function is very clear, much more so than the distinction between the ablative and genitive. That's true. However, this does not mean that within the 8-case system it is always easy to tell to which case this particular inflectional form belongs. Furthermore, there will be a few occasions in which the same case form will have a double duty function. The 8-case system cannot handle such a double function because such would involve two different cases. I have no idea why you think that's true. And why can't you have one word doubling as referring to two different cases instead of two different categories? I mean, what's the difference there? I don't get it. But he's a lot smarter than me. I know he is. He's a better grammarian. So you got to be careful questioning people. I must have been out of place. Thus, the definition of case is a matter of function rather than form, can sometimes be so rigid, well, it does come from the Baptists, so being rigid would fit, that it excludes part of the meaning intended by the author. It is typically Baptist, you know. A.T. Robertson, the big Baptist grammarian of many years ago, that propounded the 8-case system. So typically Baptists follow an 8-case system. Non-Baptists don't. So if you take Greek in the university, probably you're going to be getting a 5-case system. I guess if you took Greek at a Southern Baptist seminary, I suspect you might see an 8-case system. All right, so the true dative, but again, this is funny, when he talks about the dative, you got to talk about the true dative, and then the dative of location, and the dative of instrument. To me, probably in arguing against it, he probably makes the best arguments in practice for the 8-case system. He was arguing against it. But in any case, the true dative is the case of personal interest or even non-personal interest. So, first of all, the most probably straightforward use of the dative case is the indirect object. We've seen that over and over, and we're used to seeing that. Right? And you can see the idea of interest even in direct object. John gave the ball to Jim. There was a giving of the ball, and it was in the interest of Jim. So that's pretty straightforward. You have also, very close to the root meaning of the case, the dative of interest. Other grammarians call it the dative of advantage or the dative of disadvantage. Okay? So his example, food is to the stomach. Well, that'd be a literal translation, but that's a dative of advantage. Food is for the stomach. For if we are beside ourselves, it is for God. That's in the dative. If we are in our right minds, it is for you. Those are both datives of advantage. Dative of disadvantage. You testify against yourselves. We see how that works. For the one who eats and drinks judgment to himself. Well, that's a dative of disadvantage. Eats and drinks judgment on himself or against himself or something like that. You see how that works? Then you have a dative of reference or a dative of respect. And, you had a genitive of reference, but it's not used as much. It's not as significant a case category as the dative of reference. First example, consider yourselves to be dead with reference to sin, but alive with reference to God. Alive to God, dead to sin. You see how that works. Dative of destination. Our king is coming to you. Or when he came, he approached the house. Dative of possession. That's something akin to the dative of advantage, is it? In concept. You can see that the idea of possession not only is a descriptive idea, but it can also be an idea that has to do with personal interest, right? Sometimes it's in your interest to possess something. So neither a share nor a lot in this manner belong to you. Dative and simple apposition. Well, we've seen this over and over. If you have a word in the dative and you want to redefine it or rename it, we would use a dative. My spirit rejoices in God, my Savior. Well, God happens to be in the dative, so Savior, as a renaming of God, would also be in the dative. Just as we said, every case gets to have its whatever of apposition. Although the genitive can have a genitive that's not a simple apposition. All right, local dative uses, or guess what? The locative case. Well, I don't know if you're used by others, but I'm pretty used by it. There is a dative of sphere, a dative of time. So you can have a locative of time, place, and sphere. Sphere is a logical thing. It's a logical place. You might say that when Paul talks about us being in Christ, that's a locative of sphere. We have a certain relationship with Christ. The poor in spirit, the poor in the sphere of spirit. But is that a dative of reference? The poor with reference to spirit. See if you can argue those things. The dative of time, we talked about time expressions in the genitive, kind of time, accusative, extent of time, dative, point in time. It seems to me that the dative is probably the simplest way to make a time reference. Indicates the time when, if you look under definition, the noun in the dative indicates the time when the action of the main verb is accomplished. The dative routinely denotes point of time, answering the question, when. sure where he's going to put the idea of place, because there is a locative of place. You know, Jesus died in Israel, for example, right? So there's a literal place where that locative form, you must throw it in there someplace else, but it does happen. All right, instrumental dative uses. The dative of association, or we might want to call it the instrument of association. The men who were traveling with him. The dative of manner, or the instrument of manner. He speaks with boldness. That's almost a means or instrument idea, isn't it? He speaks with boldness. But boldness isn't a thing, it's a quality, isn't it? So if you're doing something using a quality, we would call that a manner of doing something, because you're not using something physical to do. The dative of means or instrument. Instrument of means. She wiped his feet with her hair. So she used that almost as a tool, right? As an instrument. We maintain that a person is justified by faith. Faith is the agent that, not the agent, but the means by which someone is justified. Dative of agency. This one is another abused case. The dative subject was used to indicate the personal agent by whom the action of the verb is accomplished. This is an extremely rare category in the New Testament as well as in ancient Greek in general. Because normally agency is the ablative. Hupa, the preposition hupa plus the ablative is how you get personal agency in Greek. By somebody. Hupa, right? Genitive form. But, well, you could call it a genitive of agency if you want to. I think he does. But it's really an ablative of agency in my mind. All right. Top of page 76, letter C. Here it is. I was telling you how agency is expressed in the New Testament. Apart from naming the agent as the subject, there are two common ways to express agency in the New Testament. Hupa plus the genitive or ablative is used for the ultimate agent. Dia plus the genitive is used for the intermediate agent. So that's good to know. Dative of measure, pretty straightforward. Dative of cause. He did not waver in unbelief, or he did not waver because of unbelief. Cognate dative. Now, this is kind of interesting. The dative noun is cognate to the verb either formally or conceptually. This is not common. The key to this use of the dative is its cognate force. Another clue is that the dative can usually be translated as an adverb modifying the verb. The force of the cognate dative will be primarily to emphasize the action of the verb. And this may be a Hebraism, thinking of the infinitive used in Hebrew. Even if it is not particular to Greek influenced by Hebrew, it could be used more in the New Testament because of the influence of Hebrew. You see what I mean? So, I desired with desire, or I earnestly desired. Elijah prayed earnestly. You can see that he prayed with a prayer. Right? What does that mean? It's a way of emphasizing. And again, uses of dative after certain words. Dative of direct object. We think of the dative as an indirect object, but dative sometimes can be used as a direct object. To believe in God. That's not unusual to see a dative indirect object. Worshiping Him, that all the angels of God worship Him. So worship takes this direct object in the dative form. You will see in a lexicon, when you look up a word, you will see sometimes it gives you tini, or tinos, somewhere in the beginning of the definition of the word. And what that means is, when it does that, is that it's going to take its object in that case. If it says tinos, it's going to be taking its object in the genitive. Why? Tinos means something, right? So it's saying, I hear something, tinos. Telling you it's going to be whatever the word is that I'm hearing is in the genitive. Or to forgive could be a dative. Take this object in the dative. So you see, tini, something in the dative. Right? So that's how it's designated in the dictionary when you see it. Dative after certain nouns. All the city came out for a meeting with Jesus. Well, you can understand how the noun meeting might be followed by a dative form. Really the association kind of idea might be an instrument of association there. Service to the saints, that could be the idea of a dative of advantage, right? Service to the saints. Dative after certain adjectives, disobedient, to parents, and it just kind of actually naturally falls. And it's interesting how English is very similar to that. And of course, dative after certain prepositions. All of the oblique cases, what do we mean by an oblique case? A case that is not nominative. Right? Nominative is just a straightforward case. The other cases take a certain angle on the word. Right? So the oblique cases can all be used as objects of a preposition. So there's always going to be a category, genitive, dative, accusative, with certain prepositions. Okay, any question on the dative case, the dative form, accusative, locative, instrumental? Yes?
It seems like some of these more intricate ones, he basically says, just find a good concordance, or baggy.
Find a good what?
Concordance, or baggy for a lot of these. Or a lot of these just like the dative direct object. And some of those, are they just pretty obscure? And so.
No, you just have to know. Basically.
Okay.
But you get used to what kind of words take their, words that are more sensory feeling kind of words sometimes tend to take their object in the genitive form.
Or the motion.
Yeah, and words like, to forgive or worship, things like that, take their object in the dative. What we're saying is you can only really know because the lexicon tells you that. So you know what baggy is? That's another English thing. Good thing to have. We need to have that. So that's what I was telling you. When you look at it in the lexicon, you're going to see if it takes its object in something other than the accusative, which the vast majority would take it in accusative, right? But if it takes it in something other, you're going to see tinos or tini indicating what the object is. So that's what he's saying. We can probably get away with opening that one a little more back there because there's probably not so much noise running through that.
No, probably not.
Huh?
I said
Still
no,
loud.
probably not. He said he can't hear when it's open, so.
Oh, you can't? Okay. Well, if you can't hear, that's another thing.
Yeah, you can sort of hear the highway coming in from back there.
Gotcha.
Maybe we should just take a break.
Well, we will as soon as we do the accusative case. All right. So the accusative case.
Accusation.
Case of limitation. Top of page 82, first full paragraph. Instead, the least objectionable umbrella for the accusative uses is to describe it as the case of extent or imitation. Of course, we know the accusative of direct object. And then we have the double accusative of person thing. Now, in my opinion, he does a marvelous job here of making this very complicated. There are a couple of uses of a double accusative. Okay? There is a double accusative that is just a double accusative, and then there is a double accusative that we can call the object complement. Right? What do we mean by a double accusative? Well, there are certain verbs that can take two objects. That's lexosyntactical too, isn't it? For example, the word to teach. Now, some people try to be smart alecks, and they say, what do you teach? Well, I teach Greek. You do? Well, I teach students. All right? La, la, la. Well, you can teach students, so but also teach Greek. And I'll explain to the smart aleck that teach is actually a word that takes a double accusative. So I can either say I teach Greek, or I teach students. I'm only using one accusative in each of those examples. Or I can say I teach students Greek. Two accusatives. Right? So there's a set of words that by the nature of their meaning, right, can take a double accusative. Now, the thing you need to know is that for simple double accusative, I teach students Greek, students and Greek don't refer to the same thing. Right? Then you have a double accusative that's called an object complement. For example, the word called. I called John a traitor. Both in the accusative, John, and traitor. The thing you need to remember about an object complement is that John and traitor refer to the same thing, or the same person. See what I mean? But in either case, they're both in the accusative case, in either case. So you can have a simple double accusative, two accusatives, or you can have an object complement. Still two accusative, but in the object complement they both refer to the same person. Right? Now, passive transforms, when I taught from Getches or Gochels, however you want to say that name, the students in the workbook had to do massive amounts of passive transforms. That is, take a sentence, John gave the ball to Jim, and transform that into a passive. The ball was given to Jim by Bob. I think I changed the name there, but you get the idea. Right? And so, Bob gave the ball to Jim. So the direct object becomes the subject of the passive sentence, and the subject of the active sentence is personal agency now, using Kupal or the ablative part of it, right? And all of that kind of stuff. So he goes into that with this whole double accusative thing, which we can look at. For example, if you said, I teach students Greek, you could think of a passive transform by saying, students are taught Greek by me. So now students is transformed from an accusative to a nominative because it's now the subject of the passive sentence. Greek, which was accusative in the active sentence, stays accusative in the passive sentence. And then I, which was the subject of the first sentence, gets changed into an agency who follow the ablative by me in the passive transform. So the idea is that you have a passive sentence with an accusative in it. Why? Because it's a passive transform of a double accusative. Same thing with I called John a traitor. John was called a traitor by me. Traitor can remain in the accusative case. So see the examples? Ask me whatever. He will teach you all things. He anointed you with oil. Now, in English, that's not a double accusative. Anointed you with oil, using a preposition of with oil. But in Greek, it is a double accusative. Anoint you oil. But that's not an object complement because the oil and me is not the same thing. Questions about those two? All right. If you understand that, we'll move on. Page 86, predicate accusative. Examples, they knew that he was the Christ. They knew him to be the Christ. So Christ is in the accusative, but it's interesting, it's almost used like, well, it is kind of used like a predicate nominative, right? They knew him to be the Christ. Because of the way the sentence is structured, because all the object of the sentence. Although you were dead, so you being dead in your trespasses. Now, that is almost as if it were an accusative absolute with an accusative participle and an accusative noun. Accusative is the subject of the infinitive. He talks about how in the older understandings of things, an infinitive, I mean, think about it, it's very logical. Why is an infinitive an infinitive? What's the difference between an infinitive and a finite verb? Well, what's a finite verb?
Finishing this.
Pardon?
Well, the infinitive is just, they're like to be verbs, right?
Right.
They don't really express time.
They don't express what?
Time.
Well,
Not really.
well, what, yeah, that's true, but what the point of it is that a finite verb has a form that tells you that it relates to a certain person and number. So we learned o, ace, a, amen, et abusi. So the present active indicative is o, ace, a, amen, et abusi. The present active infinitive is ain. Right? There is no form distinction for first, second, third person or singular and plural. So a finite verb is limited, agapo can only be used as a first person singular. So it's limited. An infinitive is not limited by person and number. So it makes a lot of sense, to think of an infinitive as a verbal noun and as really not having a specified subject, right? For example, you could use an infinitive as a subject of a sentence. To err is human. To forgive, divine. Now, what's the subject of to err? Well, it could be anything. It's not specified. It's just a verbal idea used in a noun slot, to err. So older Marians would see an accusative there that was designed to indicate the person or thing that did the action of the infinitive, and they called it an accusative of reference. So to err with reference to pastors is human. Or we might translate that, for pastors to err is human. they didn't call it the subject of the infinitive, or they called it the so-called subject of the infinitive, because technically an infinitive really can't have an express subject, right? Although it can if you use an accusative of reference. Now, now they're just kind of blowing off all that logic for good or ill, whatever, and calling it the subject of the infinitive. So, here he says, number 5, the accusative subject of the infinitive. Well, I still like to call it the so-called subject of the infinitive, because it's kind of not that straightforward, at least in my mind. All right.
Question.
Yeah.
Where does he deal with the accusative as the object of the infinitive? Did I miss that? Because it seems like his example at the top of page 87 and link 4, Tom Tristan appears to be more the object of the infinitive than anything else.
Oh. Yeah, but the infinitive's a verb of being. So how does a verb of being have an object? So that's why we're not going to call it the object of the infinitive. We're going to call it a predicate accusative.
Okay.
Because a verb of being is not going to have a direct object; it's going to have a predicate noun. So in that, I mean, you're onto something there, because it's functioning in the same way as an object of an accusative, only this time, or an object of an infinitive, only this time the infinitive is a verb of being. So it doesn't have objects; it has a predicate accusative.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yeah.
So similarly with those two, the English translations in both Luke and Ephesians are are imperfect, but the Greek is the imperfect tense. I mean, is that because it's describing, or it's a predicate?
Well, in the Luke, see, the infinitive is going to key off of the tense of the verb, the main verb, and that in this case is a daison. Okay, and that's past tense. And so they knew he was the Christ. So that's why I suspect in the Ephesians example, the main verb is in the past as well. You being dead in your trespasses were made alive. I remember the context. Were made alive together. However it goes. So
it seems like the aorist and the imperfect share quite a bit. We should agree.
what do you mean?
Because they're both in the past.
Well, they're both past, yeah, and they could conceivably end up with a similar English translation because of that. So, accusative is the subject of an infinitive. Accusative can also be the object of an infinitive, we know that. But look at some examples.
Dr.
Yeah?
I have a question on that one. He mentions Philippians 1:7 down here in definitive with two accusatives.
Okay.
Because I have you in my heart, or because you have me in your heart.
Oh, yeah.
And he never, then he does this little discussion here, but I don't know how to apply that to get an answer to the question, which one is it, Philippians 1:7? Or is it both?
Early analyses suggested that word order or proximity to the infinitive were the determining factors of word order has since been shown to be at best a secondary consideration. And only in certain kinds of constructions more recently, two types of constructions have been detected, each with its own set of rules. So, subject, accusative, predicate, accusative. Okay, and then subject, accusative, directive, to be analyzed differently since there is no semantic correlation between this construction and intended. Potentially ambiguous passages and the rest, regardless of word order, can be deciphered by applying common sense. Well, I guess if you apply common sense to that, you should be able to get it.
Well, I thought I did, but I saw my congregation say no.
Further analysis outside the New Testament is further.
And so I'm just, I'm confused on that.
I don't think he gives an answer to that.
He doesn't give an answer, and I'm not sure how to find one.
Well, in the first part of that sentence, say it is right for me to feel this way about you.
Yeah.
I
Because
think what he's basically saying
I
is,
Somebody
have you
has
in my
something in
heart,
your
or you
heart.
have me in your heart. They both make sense to me. So,
I think he's basically saying more research needs to be done on that. Yeah. Let's see.
Look it up in Baggy.
Maybe it's meant to be ambiguous. You never know. I mean, that's a little bit of a cop-out, and it probably isn't, though.
yeah,
But if it were ambiguous, we
the
could.
person in my congregation went with the word order and suggested, because of the word order, it should be because you have me in your heart.
Well, one thing he does seem to be saying is that you can't necessarily go by rule order.
Yeah.
The Pope says may is the subject and nuance is the object.
Then it would be I have you in my heart.
Yes.
Yes.
See, I agree with the Pope.
Well, I did too, but then we disagree with Dr. Rodmacher, don't we?
I don't know.
Didn't you ask him? Last
No,
time?
I didn't ask you. No. No, I didn't know. I didn't ask you.
I thought somebody asked him.
Someone from my congregation.
Maybe we should ask him, then we'd find out.
Get the final word.
I also want to ask the question, what difference does it make to our understanding of the passage? Now, I still think it's important for us to be able to nail down the syntax, if we can. But in any case, he's saying, we're close.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and isn't it a mutual, maybe it is ambiguous on purpose, because it would be a mutual relationship, and if one has the other in the heart, wouldn't the other have the other one in the heart, kind of a thing? I don't know. But in any extent, he's saying, because we have this kind of close relationship, we have this intimacy, so it's right for me to feel this way. Now, that's a little bit of a cop-out, that we'd like to nail down the syntax. But sometimes, you know, if it can go this way and it can go this way, you ask yourself the question, well, what's the end result of both of those? And the end result really is virtually the same in terms of understanding the passage. It would help a little bit when, you know, to not worry too much about that. Because we do worry when we can't nail down the syntax, it keeps us up at night.
Yeah. Doesn't it make sense that Paul must have had one or the other in mind? Otherwise, he would have said more plainly, because we care so much about each other. I mean, couldn't he have said it more plainly if he had meant both?
Well, maybe it's one of those diplomatic sort of things, so that if they read it one way, then good. But if they fail, maybe he doesn't want to assume, in other words, that they're so affectionate toward him. You know, and if they don't, they'll automatically read it the other way and go, oh, Paul's affectionate toward us.
We spent the rest of the book talking about how affectionate they are for nobody else shared in my suffering over you, you can never sin.
So they've shown their affection for him and given him a reason to be affectionate for them.
These kind of reasons. Well, it was interesting because I mean, there's one where I've looked all over and no one seems to have any definitive answer on that.
I don't think even he doesn't.
No, he doesn't.
Yeah. So that is a very interesting question, though, very much. I wonder if you could find, as they suggest, outside the New Testament, I wonder if you could find other constructions similar to that in...
Are there others like this in the New Testament? New Testament? That you're aware of?
I can't think of one offhand. I mean, there are other constructions like that, yeah, that there are two accusatives, one being the subject and the infinitive, the other being the object, but I don't know that there are examples of that not being clear. I guess there probably are. He said, well, there are only a few potentially ambiguous passages. What are they? He gave us one. It is a very fascinating question. That's when grammar and syntax kind of get fascinating. Huh? Oh, the accusative of retained object. That's what I was telling you about with passive transform kind of thing. Again, accusative of apposition, of simple apposition, like you've seen. Then there are some adverbial uses of the accusative, adverbial accusative of manner. You received freely, give freely, and seek first. How should you seek it? How should you give? Accusative of measure, of extent, space, or time. So here's where our accusative of time comes in. Top of page 91. This intrigued me a lot here. Summary of genitive, dative, and accusative of time. One way to remember the distinctions between the case uses for time is to remember the root idea of each case. However, under the 5-case system, this may prove a bit confusing. Therefore, for the cases used for time, it may be helpful to think in terms of the 8-case system. The root idea of the genitive is kind, thus the genitive of time expresses the kind of time or time within which. The root idea of the locative, not dative, is position, expressing point in time. The root idea for the accusative is extent, thus the accusative of time expresses the extent of time. So one illustration may help. If I were to say I worked last night, I could mean during the night, all night, or at a point in time in the night. But in Greek, the case of night would indicate what I meant. If I had said nuktos in the genitive, I would mean during the night. If I had said nukti, the dative, I would mean at a point of time in the night. If I had said nukta, accusative, I would mean for the length of the night, and can be illustrated graphically as below. All right, accusative of respect or general reference. The accusative of reference. For Moses writes that with reference to the righteousness that comes in the law. Moses writes. So you need to know. All right, special use of accusative after certain prepositions. We have all the oblique cases. All right, those are both for tonight. Any other questions? How did we do that? 10 minutes to 8.